Good morning and welcome, fellow sovereigns. And this is probably the hardest talk that I've decided to do. It's my choice. And I'll explain why in a moment. So I'll start with a post from this morning from a Kiwi friend, Sue, who's now in distant Wisconsin. So she put a post up about a word I'd never heard of, which is pronoia. So we know what paranoia is, which is the belief that everything is conspiring against us, the whole world. So pronoia apparently means the belief that everything is conspiring for us. So that's the easy bit. And the more general we get, the easier it is to be in peace. And so the more specific we get, the harder it is to hold that peace in general. So I'd like to bring some peace to a current situation, or bring some hope. But what am I bringing hope to? And that's the difficult part. How much do I disclose? So I'm just going to start, because I'm going to have to get specific. So we had another storm in the Hawke's Bay yesterday, and it's probably going on right now, I don't know. And I'm not going to grace it with personifying it with a human's name. I'm just going to call it destruction. I don't know. Maybe the one they sent down to Auckland, to let's say the poorer part of Auckland, West Auckland, let's say that's destruction number 50. And then they sent another one through, it touched on Northland, and then missed the Bay of Plenty, went up in the air kind of around the East Cape, and then hooked back into Gisborne and then down to the Hawke's Bay. Massive destruction. So let's call that destruction 51. And then they created an earthquake off near Wellington. Let's call that destruction 52. And so yesterday's was destruction 53. Let's call it that. I'm not going to pretend it's anything else. And so, where do you start? So, last night the civil defence people were in the Wellington airport and in the Auckland airport, and it reminded me that they have plenty of money for their pretty black and red uniforms. They have plenty of money for flying around the country business class. They have plenty of money for their expensive hotels. And then I'm told they come out of their hotels, this is in the Hawke's Bay, they come out of their plush hotels, stand on the edge of the destruction zone and say, oh, it's too dangerous, we can't go in there. And they stop people and resources going in there. Meanwhile, the people in there are having to deal with it. So there's builders and transport operators and farmers, and people with machinery are getting in there with their own machinery. And people without machinery are getting in there with their spades and brooms and everything else and having to deal with it themselves. And then I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago, and they have a relation who's a medic for the Air Force. And during the Hawke's Bay thing, one helicopter flight, because they were going in and rescuing people, this person saw 9 bodies in one helicopter flight from one helicopter. So it's obvious the police and the media are not telling the true story about the number of deaths. It's quite obvious that the authorities are not actually in there helping as they could be. And the same thing happened at Lismore, where the SES, which is the equivalent of New Zealand's civil defence, actively stopped things happening, and the same happened with the fires in Australia. So there seems to be a pattern of the authorities actually, I mean, some authorities are helping, but they're generally not helping as much as they could. And so one wonders what's happening, and it seems to be becoming a more universal thing, a non-activity, shall we say. And right at the start, almost before we knew the amount of destruction, there was the New Zealand Prime Minister saying, almost with glee, that we're going to have to compulsorily acquire land from these people in the Hawke's Bay. Now, the Hawke's Bay for non-New Zealanders is what's generally referred to as the fruit bowl of New Zealand, because it's incredibly fertile, and every orchard fruit and orchard plant, if you like, is grown there. Masses of hundreds of acres of grapes, probably thousands of acres. It's wonderful land for raising beef and mutton, sheep, and it's a very fertile, it's kind of probably one of the biggest, most fertile areas of New Zealand, which begs the question, why did they send the destruction? Anyway, so the government's quite keen on buying this land compulsorily from people. How willing are they to give it up? So it's been really strange, and there was a guy talking about the fact that yesterday they'd had 16 days of no water. Now it's day 17. So they're having to rely on the water that they filled their bathtub up with before the destruction turned up. So there were thousands of people knowing it was coming. And what can you do? So that's just a tidbit of some of the specifics. And I find that really hard to, I don't know. And if I'd been living in the 1500s, my wife could have been taken by Henry VIII or any of his henchmen as a wife, forcibly removed, taken away, and I might see her 2 years later, I might never see her. If I'd been living 100 years later, my 15-year-old son could have been stolen off the streets of London and shanghaied onto a ship. So whatever era, whatever period we're living in, humans are callous. Humans are dreadful to each other. So we're not living in any different era from that point of view. The world has always been insane, and will always be insane. So it would suggest that there's no point in trying to change the world because it's excuse me, I'm finding this really difficult, because the insanity will always be there. It will be there tomorrow, it will be there next year, it will be there in the next century. The human condition in many ways is not a kind one. If we buy into the paranoia mentality, if we believe that everything is out there conspiring against us, and we also have a choice to buy into the, what was the other one that Sue put up? Pronoia. That we believe that everything is conspiring for us. Now, it's very difficult for people in the Hawke's Bay, particularly at the moment, and people in West Auckland, particularly some weeks ago, and other places, Turkey and Syria and all of that, where they have set off earthquakes. And I feel really sad for the people, and sadness is my overlying emotion at the moment. But I know that sadness is not a good place to take action from. Anger, depression, that sense of missing out, feeling lost, none of those negative emotions are helpful in terms of taking action, whether it's mental action, verbal action, physical action. And I know that I need to return to peace, to gratitude. And my gratitude is not for anything in particular. My gratitude is simply gratitude. And when I choose, I can switch from, if you like, from paranoia to pronoia, from sadness to peace, to acceptance, to gratitude. And from a place of gratitude, from a place of peace, from a place of acceptance, I can do something about whatever's going on. And of course, you know, buying groceries, and there's agencies and trucking firms who are sending groceries across the country to the Hawke's Bay. So I can do that, I'm doing that. And I can send money, not through government agencies, I'm sorry, but there are agencies we can send money to directly, so it's going to help the people. So there are things that I can do from this moment when I stand in peace. And when I open to the goodness of the universe, I will find resources, and I will find agencies that can get those resources to where they're needed. Whereas if I'm closed up, if I'm constricted in paranoia, somehow the universe doesn't bring me the information I need. So I know that when I open and step into peace and choose peace, it's a choice. And sometimes, right now, when I get specific about what's going on, it's very difficult to step into peace. And when I step back into generalities, i.e. the world is insane, has always been insane, and it will always be insane, it is a little easier to step into peace. And when I'm in that place of peace, when I'm in that space of God, perhaps, the resources and the information to make a difference will turn up. I know this. I've always known this. And so that is my choice today. This overwhelming sadness for what's going on, for what we do to each other. They're not acts of God, they're not acts of nature, these destructions. Destruction 53, which is today's and yesterday's. We do this to ourselves. And I know that my sadness about what people do to each other in general, I have done that to individuals myself. As an individual, I have been unkind to people. I have been less than compassionate. And so that is my mission today, to step into those experiences that I have experienced, and made other people unnecessarily sad. And when I can step into those and be my own counselor, and send love and healing and gratitude and apologies to those I've harmed, I don't know, somehow the sadness of the humans dissipates and I can step into a little more peace. So it's very disjointed today, I'm sorry, and I've taken about 6 times to get to do this, and I've ended up coming down here to the piece of the water, and it's quite easy to be in peace when we've got a scene like this. It looks darker than it is probably. It's quite light, but my camera does the whole automatic focus thing. And so I wish you peace, and the recognition that whatever's going on, whatever negative feelings are going on, we can all change them to peace, to gratitude, to acceptance. And from that God space of acceptance and peace, may your actions be way more powerful than they would otherwise be. And I bless you and all who sail in her.